Come on, pal. I don't want to hear your life story. Paw me.
Hey everyone, this is Eric at Monkey Paw Wargaming. Today we're going to do a book review, a rule book review of The Walking Dead All-Out War. It's the Anthology, and this was released recently. The nice thing about this book is it contains a lot of content that you can use for campaigns, narratives. There's some stuff in here for the Call to Arms version of the game, which is sort of for large-scale battles. There's also some content in here for their board game called Here's Negan. So the thing that this encompasses is it basically captures all of the Walking Dead content across all three of the sort of game systems that Mantic has. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at the book and we'll dive in. Okay, so here's what the cover is. So you can clearly see that this book is rather thick. The great thing about this book is that it contains all of the rules from all the expansions of Walking Dead up until this point. So if you've had all those expansions and you've bought into those box sets and you have the little thin rule books that went with each, that sort of unlocked every little piece of rule along the way, this codifies it all and puts it all into one resource. So the great thing about this book is it's one book, everything's in it, and it's all laid out. It's got a great table of contents that allows you to just sort of one book to carry with you and you're off and you're running. The additional content that comes within it is in addition to the rules themselves. So you're getting a lot of stuff in this book, and that's what I feel is why it's a great buy, and I can't recommend it enough. So here is the interior here. You have the table of contents. Basically gives you, the game overview of how to sort of play the game, the components of all the things that you're going to need to play. Basically the whole front half of this book is essentially the main rules of the game. And like I said previously, they combined everything from all the expansions up until this point. The only thing that this is missing is the Whisperers. The rules for them are not in this book. So the other part of this is you now have, the cool thing is it gives you additional information about scenery, survivor groups, so gives you content about large games and alliances, creating custom survivors. And so in the scenario play here, they basically give you like player versus player scenarios, general scenario rules. This one will be interesting to try out at some point is the mega scenario, which is a really large game. Generally the game is only played at a very small skirmish level, anywhere between, like normally games that I play are anywhere between like 150 points to 200 points. So this mega scenario is sort of combining your faction with like a friend or whatever, and combining factions, and you're playing like a giant multiplayer game where you choose alliances of who you're going to fight with, and then you guys fight it out over territory or resources or just bad blood between rival factions and things like that. So that'll be, this is an interesting sort of mission. And then you have campaign play. So it gives you some information about map campaigns, the post-game sequence that sort of follows it, multiplayer scenarios. It talks about narrative campaigns, and then what it does is it compiles all of the narrative campaigns that have been in all the expansions up until this point. It puts it all into one place. So and then again, it has Call to Arms. I personally haven't played Call to Arms, but it has 3 scenarios here that extra content for people that play this version of the game. And then they have Here's Negan. So Here's Negan, they give you 2 bonus scenarios. People that aren't familiar with the Here's Negan board game, the board game itself comes with 12 scenarios that basically detail it's sort of a narrative set of missions where you start in the sanctuary, you arrive in the sanctuary, and you're sort of clearing it out. So then you'll have these extra scenarios to play. And then they give you some bonus content in addition to that where it's called Here's Rick. And they give you some rules which reverse the roles, where instead of Negan moving through a building, it's Rick and his group of the Atlanta faction. That's the table of contents. Like I said, you get the game overview here. So the great thing about this is that you have all the rules, again, like I said, in one place, the setting up. They've even corrected some of the rules with, anything that was FAQ'd or updated has been updated in here. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, it's just, you generally have all of this. Where is it here? All the way up until this point here is basically the rules, from the last expansion before, the Whispers. So here they have, how to build a survivor group. They talk about veteran skills. The veteran skills, I believe that was in the Made to Suffer expansion. And then they talk about game alliances, about what factions would sort of interact, as far as like who's going to be trusted allies, who's going to be tenuous allies, and then enemies. They give you all the icons of all the different factions. And then, in this section here, they sort of show you how to create custom survivors. I myself have several custom survivors that I use in my games. I think they made some slight tweaks to this from the previous printed version, which I think was in Miles Behind Us, which is good. I think they sort of cleared some things up and essentially made the building of this a little bit more balanced. And then we have scenarios. So this scenario play here. So these scenarios here are essentially kind of generic scenarios that essentially could be one-offs, or you can string them together into some sort of a campaign if you're already building a campaign or have one in process. These can be in-betweens of something that's more narrative-driven if you're sort of writing a campaign. But these scenarios are great. I've only played a few of them. Looking forward to trying all of them out. But I think there's 7 or 8 of them. There's seven basic scenarios, and then the 8th one is the all-out war mega scenario, which I spoke to earlier. So this one will use special objective cards, which I believe are also in the Made to Suffer expansion. Okay, and then we'll talk about campaign play. So campaign play, they give you essentially how a campaign turn works, arranging of games, the post-game sequence, map-based campaigns. The post-game sequence is always the fun part because it's sort of like you're updating the map. If somebody was removed as a casualty, you sort of roll to see what happened to them. Gives you an underdog bonus. There's some really cool things where there's special locations that you can mark on the map. Really, really cool. It adds a lot of narrative to your game, a lot of content with these types of special locations or special buildings. You can really sort of build your table, really get detailed and customized with the types of maps and missions that you're doing. Very cool, very thematic. Then they give you a multiplayer scenario, so I haven't really read what this one does, but the neat thing about it is that, again, additional content. You're getting all the rules, all the expansions. And there's the narrative campaigns here, which I spoke to earlier as well. So like, in every expansion, they gave you narrative campaigns that basically go replay the events from the comic book. So these are all narrative driven. They give you the types of participants that, were in those missions specifically. You can always substitute with alternatives, but so they have all of these in here. And there's quite a few of them. So the great thing about it is it's all in one place. You don't have to carry a pile of books with you anymore. It goes all the way up into Woodbury. And the return to the farm, an emergency supply run. Yeah, there's some of these missions I just can't wait to get into. They're so cool. And then the Watchers in the Woods. So these guys are the hunters. These are the guys that sort of are cannibals. I can't wait to get into this stuff. These types of scenarios are really kind of scratch the itch of like very, very thematic and, get very detailed in terms of like how you really want to build the map. So like I said earlier, this book doesn't really have the rules for the Whispers in it. but it does tease them in a bonus chapter here called Whispers into Screams. So what it gives you is it introduces the character Jesus and Lydia. It sort of gives you basic concepts of what the Whisperers can do without giving you the full rules, because the rules at this point, when this was released, that expansion was still on the horizon. Okay, so in this section here you have the Call to Arms. Now, I'm not very familiar with this version. The Call to Arms is sort of like a larger scale version of the game, where like the factions aren't small groups anymore, but they're organized into large groups, or one could say even like armies, right? So the maps are generally bigger, more intense, more involved. So it'll be interesting to see, once I end up getting the book and learning how to play with larger factions, how these missions will shake out. I really can't comment on them too much because I don't play this version of the game. All I can tell you is that the content is in there, and from what I can tell, it looks really good. In this section here, you have the Here's Negan. So for people that are just wanting to get their feet wet with the sort of Walking Dead universe, you have to remember that this version of The Walking Dead is based on the comics, not the TV show. So there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. But if you want to get your feet wet before you commit to possibly the other games, I highly recommend the Here's Negan board game. Comes with some great models, comes with the dice. It's a board game, so it comes with everything you need to play. You can play it straight out of the box. You don't have to go anything beyond just that box. It's a lot of fun. It's sort of a dungeon crawl type game, but so in this one here, it's giving you additional missions, because in the Here's Negan board game, I think you have to play through like 12 or 13 missions, and they progressively get more difficult as you move up through those missions. I can't wait to get into playing these because I'm very vested into this game. I play a lot of Here's Negan. So for me, this content is really great, and I just can't wait to kind of sink my teeth into this and see what kind of fun we can have. And then they have a bonus section called Here's Rick. So it's essentially you're flipping the script where you're using Rick as sort of like the Negan character, and then you're using these characters as the minions or followers. Very cool. So these ones are sort of Rick and Atlanta based, so you're using the map tiles to sort of represent the prison, and I just think these are going to be great too. I can't wait to sort of build these, use the models that I have, and then kind of play these missions. And that's pretty much it. So there you have it. That is the overview and review of The Walking Dead Anthology. I hope that you enjoyed the content. I also hope that you will check this book out. The book is definitely worth buying. I can't say that enough. I can't sing the praises of this book highly enough, especially if you're a super fan of The Walking Dead all-out war game like I am. I also think that this leaves an opening for the future for them to develop other anthologies based on additional content that they will release throughout like a calendar year, maybe. Something like how like Games Workshop does essentially an anthology at the end of every year for Warhammer 40K and Age of Sigmar. So if they kind of stick with that sort of pattern, you're going to have a lot of good content, additional scenarios. I know that they did some solo play ones on their website, so maybe putting those into a future one, that would all be good things for the game and the health of the community. So I hope that you like this video, and hit like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys soon.